know if that's what they want.
Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by PICA Executive Director Marissa Waxman to discuss her new position, PICA's amended role now that the city's bond debt from 1991 has been paid off. We'll explain that. And her view of the current budget. And Hall Monitor education correspondent Lisa Haver will walk us through the new appointees and process to the school board. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. It's been a busy week. Budget hearings yesterday and today. Mm-hmm. And on top of the budget hearings, there were the appropriations hearing this morning. Mm-hmm. Councilmember Kendra Brooks had a press conference. So there's been a lot going on at City Hall today. But we were there to talk about it.
It'd be nice if they coordinated some of this stuff. If the right hand and the left hand knew what each other was doing.
Yeah, that would be helpful. But, so here we are. We're going to have more to say about that, all those things actually, in the newsletter on Friday and Saturday. So you'll be able to see that in our full report. So without further ado, let's bring on Lisa Haver. Lisa, how are you tonight?
Great. Good to see you. Thanks, Larry. Hi, Denise.
Hi.
So another thing that happened this week, yesterday, I think, and it all blurs together because it's been such a crazy couple of days. The appointees to the school board have been selected by the mayor, and you were at that event yesterday. So give us a little bit of context and tell us what was happening there.
Yes. The mayor of the city, through the Home Rule Charter, selects all 9 members of the school board. We are the only district in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that does not have an elected school board. So we're just passive observers in this whole process. We elect city council, we elect our judges, we elect the mayor. We have nothing to say about who's on the school board. So a new mayor can appoint all 9 members, which Mayor Parker has done in the last couple of days. And we were at that press conference yesterday where we met the new appointees. 4 of the people presently serving on the board are coming back, and that's Reginald Streeter, Joyce Wilkerson, Chow Wing Lam, and Sarah Ashley Anders. And then there's 5 new appointees who people met for the first time yesterday, the public met. So it is frustrating for people like me and other education advocates to have concerns and bring up issues and then really have nothing to say about who's going to be on that board, spending the money, making decisions, because the school board is a governmental body. And you may not know it to watch that, but they are an independent body, and they independently spend an annual budget of currently $4.5 billion. They make education policy. They make decisions that affect everybody in the city, whether you are a student, a teacher, a parent, because the school board can choose to close public schools, and they've already started hinting around about that. They can choose to open more charter schools, or they can choose to renew charter schools or not. So they are a political body. The school board is the governing body of the school district of Philadelphia.
So one of the things that we've been talking about for a while now, since this process began, is kind of how opaque it's been. We haven't really gotten a look at the process itself, but also who these people are. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And really, this only started, 2 months ago? Kind of on the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
It felt like.
I think opaque, Larry, would be a kind word. I would say blackout. Mm-hmm. The nominating panel met for the first time on February 1st. And then they met again a few weeks later. And during that time, whatever they were doing, reviewing applications, interviewing people, talking, the public had no access to that at all. That was all done in executive session, which I would contend, not just me, would be a violation of the Sunshine Act because they should be meeting in public. So now that the mayor has chosen 9 of the people who, the nominating panel submitted 27 names to the mayor. Of those names, she picked 9. Those people right now are nominees, and they have to be confirmed by city council. I know that this question was asked yesterday. I know because Denise asked it. What happens if city council doesn't confirm one or any of these people? That would mean the nominating panel has to reconvene and pick another candidate. And then after we watch all this unfold, as I said, we wait for that puff of white smoke to ascend from City Hall. And then we come in and we see who the nominees are. We can, if we attend city council and see what's going on there, we could maybe hear from the nominees. And then after all that is done, I'm going by what has happened in the past since 2018 when the school board was reestablished and after the School Reform Commission was dissolved. What happens after the nominating panel and the mayor picks and council confirms? Then there is what they have called like a talking and listening tour, where members of the public can actually go out and talk to people and ask them questions. It's, I mean, and I guess if you don't like the answer, there's really not too much you can do because they've already been selected and confirmed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Denise, you were at this press conference too yesterday. What were your takeaways?
Other than the fact that the mayor's press office has learned nothing at all from that their media handling operation is still just as bad as I remember. Oops, did I say that out loud? Another thing I learned is that everybody is on this. Well, first of all, whoever did the whole cleanest, greenest, safest city thing, they need a raise because everybody, and I do mean everybody, said that phrase. But you also have, these folks coming in. Some are new, some are old, some have been here before. And the scuttlebutt I'm hearing that one of them, Joyce Wilkerson, is kind of getting the side eye from some of the council members because, in this administration's tradition of recycling, she's been recycled twice on the school board. And some people are a little iffy about that. But it looks like an interesting group of people who are going to be asked to follow a vision that I'm hoping that on the 100th day, we will actually get a look at what that vision actually is. Because other than the year-round school discussion, we're not hearing anything else. And, it's nice that you're, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about modernizing buildings. You're talking about, year-round schooling. You're talking about modernizing education and making things equal and more VOTEC, training and stuff. But, you've had 100 days. We kind of like to know what your vision actually is and how these people, most of whom are not actually new in the purest sense, fit into it.
Denise, if I could, what you're saying is really important. And what we did here was people thanking the mayor for appointing them, and that's fine. And many vowing to carry out her vision. My 2 problems with that is one, what you just said. I don't know what that vision is, because all we heard during the campaign and even since then is year-round school. And I mean, unless somebody's printing money in the basement of 440 I don't know how that's going to happen. But there's another point here that really needs to be made, which is that board is independent. That board is not in the executive branch of the city government. That board is not part of the mayor's cabinet. They are supposed to act in an independent way. That is very tough because the voters didn't pick them. But after you leave that press conference and maybe pay tribute to the person who appointed you, you have to remember that your constituents are the people of the city. The members of the board can only be removed for cause. So the members of the board do not have to be hauled into the mayor's office to explain anything they voted for or not. They are independent. They have to think about their constituents, and we think of constituents as voters, but whether or not we got a chance to vote for them, they are accountable to the public. So I wanted to make sure everybody understood they don't have to carry out whatever it is, the mayor's vision. They have to hear from the people who come to the meetings, who bring their issues, who talk to them and do surveys and other ways. That's what the board's supposed to do.
Now,
and Lisa, you make a good point with that, because I think a lot of people, even in city government, have this confusion about about the school district and what they can get it to do. And they don't take into consideration the fact that just like council is independent of the mayor, the school district is independent of both.
Yes. That doesn't mean, because when the city charter was changed after the dissolution of the SRC, there is a provision in there that after the mayor chooses them, they have to be confirmed by council. And twice a year, the board has to come before city council, to answer questions about what they're doing, what are they spending money on, priorities. So they are in some way accountable to the public through the public's elected representatives on city council.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I thought was interesting too about this, some current school board members reapplied to be on the school board, but were not chosen. What do you make of that?
So there are 9 members, and of the 9, 2 declined to apply. So there were 7 who did apply, and the mayor chose 4 of them. So 3 were rejected by the mayor, and 2 had already decided not to. I don't know. At first I thought it might have been an issue of the older, some, not all, but some of the older people on the board seemed to be getting shoved to the side. But then when I saw who the mayor picked as new nominees, that theory went down the tube. So I don't know. I really don't know. When you have a very secret process completely, all you can do is guess. You can only theorize, well, did she pick pro-charter people or not? Or did she pick a certain age group? Or does she want people with financial background? All you can do is kind of wait around and guess, because there's no other way for you to know what the mayor's office is thinking about.
Well, and there's something else too. When we look at the people, the new people who were selected, the people who had not been on the board, but most likely will be, have those people been at school board meetings? Do we know if they've been there? Have they watched them at home? Like, do they have experience here?
We said this when I mean the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools. We said this since the beginning, since 2018. And so if you take, I don't know, I'm not doing the math right now, but let's just say up to 20 people who have been appointed to the board, and that was by Mayor Kenny. There was only one person who we actually knew, and that was Cecilia Thompson. Cecilia Thompson, she was coming to the board like we were, to testify and, put forth issues about, Cecilia has been a long known advocate for children with special needs. So we actually knew about Cecilia, but other than Cecilia, I don't really think I could name anybody on the board since 2018 who we had ever seen come to a board meeting. So the 5 people who were chosen, no, I never saw them at a board meeting. One was the chief of HR under Constance Clayton. So we're going back to like the late 80s. Mm-hmm. So I can only say, I don't know. Joan Stern was, she was a bond lawyer for the city. So I don't know. I wish I did know more. And as I said in the piece that I wrote, you read the Inquirer, they could do some research. We relied on Philly Power Research to do some, but the average person can only go, I wonder who that is, and hope.
Well, and it's just odd to me whenever something like this happens with anything, not just government appointments, but just, anything, when, somebody who is not involved in whatever the thing is, and there was a large pool of people who were involved, but it's somebody who was not involved gets appointed or chosen. I just think it's a very odd way to do things. I would expect, somebody who had shown some interest, and I don't know these people. I have no idea. I don't know their qualifications. Hopefully, we'll learn more about that soon.
Well, but I'll give you one example, Larry, what you're talking about. So, because we don't know who applied, you can only know if somebody tells you. One of the persons who applied was Maddie Lubert. Mm-hmm. They are a teacher currently in the school district, and they are also well-known LGBTQ advocate, and they have brought those issues to the school board a number of times. Now, I would have said, wow, great, teacher, young person, experienced, somebody who speaks out on issues, perfect. Well, for reasons that will not be disclosed in any way, Maddie Lubert was not chosen to be on the school board. We do have people who were in the district 30, 40 years ago. So I wish I knew why, but I don't know why. And I don't think anybody's going to tell us why.
Well, having a teacher makes too much sense, right? Like somebody who knows what's happening. Especially
you would think.
Who's advocating on behalf of students who are marginalized. Like that just makes too much sense to me.
Right.
I really don't understand that. So what happens now? We know that I think it's May 1st is when they get sworn in.
Right.
So
that's the idea.
Council will act before then.
Yeah.
I suppose the first chance the public will get to ask questions will be public comment during that hearing. Correct.
Right. So we know that the new board will be sworn in May 1st. And so the May action meeting of the board will be the 9 newly appointed, including the previous people, but the board appointed by Mayor Parker, they will take their seats in May. So during that time, in the next few weeks, council has to hold hearings, and yes, there will be public comment. So that will be the first time that anybody, parent, teacher, community member, student, will have a chance to say anything. But it's really fait accompli. We've attended those hearings every time there was a new school board member, and we have not seen any really challenging question.
So what should city council and the public, what should they be asking in that hearing?
I think one of my first questions would be, do you understand that you are serving on an independent board? And are you going to, what I would say, are you going to rescind the speaker suppression policies that the present board put into practice? Are you going to say we're not limiting how many people can come? We're not going to cut you down from 3 minutes to 2. If you really mean, the things that Denise and I heard people saying yesterday, you can't say all those things and then go, okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take 100 chairs out of the auditorium and then tell you we don't have enough room. And if you don't sign up in time, we don't want to hear from you. You just, that's what I would say if I were a council. Are you going to rescind the speaker suppression policies? Because that's an umbrella that can cover everything. So if you want to come and talk about toxic schools and asbestos, if you want to talk about bringing back school librarians, all those things, then you have to listen to people.
Well, I had a question, Lisa. Reginald Streeter was the president of the school board under the current board, the board that's leaving.
Yes.
Will he remain president?
That's up to the new board, because even though the mayor picks those people, the president and vice president are elected by the 9 members of the board. So there's no way to really know that. If you ask me to predict, I would predict yes. For one reason is that there are 4 people from the board that elected him coming along. So no way to know, because the new board will elect its own leaders.
And he's relatively new to that position. So I would think, if I were to put my money on it, and this is more of an uninformed opinion, I would think he would stay.
Let's put it, very rarely are there any really serious disagreements on that board, but there were, after Reginald Streeter took over as president, there was some conflict, but the 2 members who had the most issues with Streeter as president will not be coming back.
Yeah. Just an odd situation.
If you live in a democratic society where people have elections, and then you, because you live in Philadelphia, can't elect your school board, is a totally strange situation. We're just relegated to a totally passive role.
But I feel the need to say, having covered elected school boards, that is not the panacea that everybody likes to think it is.
Well, I mean, do you like
get dirty money as a result?
No,
So,
if we had time, I would really tell you why I disagree with that. And I'll just tell you, yesterday in an election in St. Louis, the right-wing candidates for their school board there, because they get to vote, none of them made it in. None of them, made it onto that school board. We saw what happened in Bucks County. If an elected school board is a bad idea for Philadelphia, then it's got to be a bad idea for everybody else. We can't be the only dummies in the state of Pennsylvania who don't know how to vote for people. So if it's a bad idea, it's got to be a bad idea for everybody. Otherwise, we should not be disenfranchised.
there's disenfranchisement, and then there is the amount of charter money that is going to come into this election if you have an elected school board. Now, I've had this argument with a lot of people, but it was my experience covering school districts in Bucks County, in Berks County, in all those places where you are allowed to elect school boards, that makes me think that, doing it in a city like Philadelphia, where we spent $22 million on a mayor's race, and most of it was PAC money. I don't know if our school district, which has been politicized enough, needs to have that too.
Then you're working on the assumption that an appointed school board is less political than an elected school board. And believe me, I've been watching this for many, many, many years. It's not. Whether you're talking about the state-appointed SRC or the mayoral appointed board, it's no less political. The media may cover it in a way that they think it's less political because it's not part of the partisan political process. Believe me, when you have a $4.5 billion budget, you are subject to the same political winds. And again, being afraid of how people are might spend money is not a reason to tell people they can't have the right to vote.
Well, like I said, I'm willing to look at the experiment, but I am telling you all right now, you'll go out there, you'll vote these school boards in, and it'll work for a while. And then when you see just how political your school board has become at the expense of children and parents, you will remember this moment and hear me say that, while it is a nice idea, you are not going to get.
But Denise, having the right to vote isn't a nice idea. If we want to accept that line of thinking, let's just appoint all the members of city council. Let's appoint the mayor. Let's just appoint everybody.
And that's usually where folks go whenever I say this. And my thing is this, I'm not saying that people shouldn't have the right to vote. I am just saying that do not think that being able to vote in your school board is going to give you any more power than you have right now. Because what I've seen in far too many elected school boards is that it doesn't. The same people that have the power in Philadelphia of appointing school board members and doing all of that are the same people that are going to have the power if you have an elected school board, because they're always going to be connected to a lot more money and a lot more power and a lot more privilege. So yeah, let's do that. Let's have an elected school board, but understand this is not the panacea to everybody.
It's not a panacea. It's just saying, do people have the right to choose their representatives, the people who spend their $4.5 billion every year? The same thing is happening. You just don't know about it. The media has always covered this school board and the SRC as if there's no politics because nobody votes for them. There is a lot of money being spent. There are a lot of political forces happening. We just don't know about them. When you have an election and you know who's giving money and you know who's supporting, then you can actually know about it. But, if you want to raise what happened in Bucks County, those Moms for Liberty right-wing people were all thrown out in the last election. There's no reason in the world to disenfranchise people.
Well,
democracy is messy.
The most surprising thing to me that Board President Streeter said in the interview we did with him, right after he ascended to the board presidency, was he wants to take the politics out of this. And Denise and I think, were both very surprised to hear that. And we even said to him, I don't think you're going to be able to do that, because everything's political. Everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It's political.
Well, if you think of politics as a bad thing, and you think that somehow because you were appointed, you will be above all that. I mean, I think he was quickly disabused of that notion, that you can make decisions about things that affect everybody in the city and spend billions of dollars and it won't be political. I think he understood that that's not possible.
Right. And I think it happened pretty quick.
Yes.
And I don't blame somebody for maybe thinking that way in the beginning. I just think it's naive.
I thought the same thing, and I did write about it at the time. But as I said, going to the board meetings every month and seeing what's happening, Reginald Streeter is a pretty smart guy. I think he realized pretty quickly when you get money from every, federal, state, local, it's inherently political. When you're spending money and there are contracts, when you're deciding about people's children, it is inherently political.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, is it just me, or are there a lot of lawyers on this school board?
On this board or in
Yes,
the
on the board that has just been appointed. Are there a lot of lawyers?
Well, Reginald Streeter, Joyce Joyce Wilkerson, and Joan Stern. I don't know. I don't think anybody else has a law degree. So I guess that's 3. I don't know what difference that makes. What are you thinking about that, Denise?
Well, no, it's just that my experience with lawyers in education is kind of like my experience with politicians in education. You know just enough to be dangerous and not enough to know what teachers and people in classrooms actually do.
There you go. That's right.
I worry more about how much money the school district spends on lawyers, I guess, than lawyers who are actually on the school board.
So I think we know when you're going to be on next. That's when this hearing comes up, yet to be scheduled, because I think that's going to be a really important day.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be the first opportunity we're going to get to really get an idea of who these people are, other than the capsule biographies that have been distributed.
Right.
So we're all going to keep an eye on this, and we know you will too.
Yeah.
And then once we know when this will be, we'll make sure we prepare for that as well as we can.
I think it'll be a good time to say, with the new mayor coming in, let's take a look back at the school board under the 6 years and the Kenny administration and say, has this school board made education better for the children and the city? I think that's something that we really need to think about. Because, Denise, we heard a lot of big word, important words and promises, and we're going to be passionate. And that's all great. It's always good to go in with a sense of hope and optimism, but you really do have to say, okay, well, let's look backwards and see, has this mayoral control board actually done that? And if not, what are we going to do to make this one different?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because there was something that Joyce Wilkerson said that was really interesting. And it brought me back to when Michael Nutter became the mayor after John Street, and a lot of the full sail changes he made to the school board and just about everything else having to do with education in the district when he became mayor. She said something to the effect that you shouldn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of education and educational policy. And usually in Philadelphia, that's exactly what happens. You get a new mayor, and he decides that whatever it depends on what his relationship with the previous mayor was. If they actually got along, he didn't just come in and rip everything up from the floorboards. But if they didn't get along, then that's what happened. And it's interesting that it was Joyce Wilkerson that said that, because of the relationship between Michael Nutter and John Street, and how that affected programs like Safe and Sound and other programs that were more tied to Street than Nutter, and were basically.
That's funny, because I thought that was her way of saying thank you for reappointing me.
Mm-hmm.
Because Streeter said something similar. I want to thank the mayor, for her commitment to continuity, which I heard as thank you for reappointing me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's probably a part of it, but like I said, considering.
But to your point, like when we say what is Parker's vision, I mean, really, what was Mayor Kenny's vision? I mean, he made a big commitment to pre-K, but in terms of the K-12 system, I couldn't tell you like what his vision was.
Yeah. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for all your hard work, and people should definitely take a look at the article in the newsletter that went out today. That'll give you a snapshot of where we are in time right now. And then as we get closer to that hearing, we're going to have some more
great
thoughts on that and some more information about that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Larry. Thanks, Denise.
All right, we'll talk soon. And that was Lisa Haver, our education correspondent. Always good to talk with her. And there's going to be a lot going on, Denise, in the next few weeks, because that's when we're going to start seeing these hearings, and there's going to be a lot to talk about, a lot of important things.
Well, and the thing is, that's just another part of the hearings. I mean, if you like public hearings, the next 2 or 3 months are going to be, you're going to feel like you've died and gone to public hearing heaven.
Oh,
because there's going to be, you still have the budget hearings, and we're going to talk a little bit about the public budget town halls that are coming up. They've been announced.
They've just been announced, Denise. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yes.
Let me bring those up. I want people to know about these. This came from the council president's office today. And here we go. So there are going to be 4 of these, Denise. The first one will be Wednesday, April 10th from 6 to 7:30 at South Philadelphia High School, 2101 South Broad Street. All right. The second one will be held Monday, April 15th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Martin Luther King High School, 6100 Stenton Avenue. All right. The third one will be in the 5th District, Thursday, April 25th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the John Street Community Center, 1100 Poplar Street. All right. And the last one will be hosted in the mighty 3rd District, Denise. That's where I'm from. That's why it's the mighty 3rd District. Right around the corner for me, actually. 49th and Chestnut at West Philadelphia High School on Monday, April 29th. So those are 4 good opportunities for people to go out there and make your voices heard. There's also going to be a couple more public comment sessions at the budget hearings, but they're a little harder to get to because they're usually during the day. So but these are good opportunities to get out there and talk to your council members and let them know what you're thinking. We're going to be the only one I know that we can't do is the first one, which is a Wednesday night, which is the night we do this show. But I'm definitely going to be at the 4th one, and I'm going to try to get to at least one of those other middle ones because I think these are really important opportunities for people to speak, and maybe we can get some of the people who are speaking to come talk to us about what they want to see. So I think that would be really good. So that there's a lot to look forward to, a lot coming up. Budget hearings right now are every Tuesday and Wednesday during the day up until May, and maybe even beyond. So there's a lot going on right now in City Council. As a matter of fact, today was a big day because the transfer ordinance bill was this morning, and then you had budget hearings. So it was a big day today. But so speaking of budget, Denise, you and I did an interview with Marissa Waxman, who has been on this program before in a different role. She was the budget director in the Kennedy administration. She left to work with the Federal Reserve of Philadelphia for a while, but she's back with us because she is now the executive director of PICA. And we're very glad to see her in that role. Marissa's always been very... Go ahead, Denise.
Now, we should tell people what PICA is in case they don't know. PICA is the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority. That is the organization. Because see, back in the late 70s, early 80s, Philadelphia, like most major cities in the United States, was having some serious money problems and was looking at possibly going bankrupt. The PICA board was formed to kind of keep an eye on Philadelphia's finances, to help the city's elected officials do better things with the budget so that we didn't end up, with a little cup standing on the street like sometimes the kids are when they're trying to raise money to, play Little League football. So PICA has been with us for a while, and its term actually expired during Tom Wolf's gubernatorial administration, but it was renewed, and it's still in existence. So we still are we still have that oversight.
And PICA was the trade the city had to make
Mm-hmm.
accepting PICA so they could, because our bond rating was very bad here in the city.
Mm-hmm.
The state's bond rating was very good. So the city went to the state and said, can you get us these bonds?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, well, we're keeping an eye on everything. So PICA still exists, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it's an even better thing that Marissa Waxman's there because she's outstanding at explaining how things work.
Mm-hmm.
So we were very lucky to speak with her earlier this week. So here's our interview with Marissa Waxman. All right, Marissa Waxman, it's good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
And I'll say this on the record, we are so glad you're at PICA because you're fantastic at explaining things. And we're really glad to be able to have you back during budget season. So can you tell us a little bit about what PICA is?
Sure. So PICA is a independent authority of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It is governed by a bipartisan board with 5 members. And it was created in 1991 when Philadelphia was in the midst of an absolute fiscal crisis that, we were drowning. Folks didn't want the city to declare bankruptcy, but had to figure out what needed to be done. And PICA was created, 1, to help the city borrow money to get out of the hole it was in, because nobody would lend the city money and they'd run out of cash. And then 2, make sure that the city didn't get itself back into a, unfortunate fiscal position. Initially for as long as those bonds were outstanding until they were paid off. But luckily, about a bit over $1 billion was borrowed in the early 90s. It finally got paid off last summer. But leading up to that, leaders in Philadelphia and Harrisburg decided, you know what, let's keep PICA going, that the benefit of its existence in supporting the city's fiscal health is worth continuing even after we've hit that milestone of paying off those bonds. And so PICA will be around now until at least 2047. And there's no more bonds outstanding. There could be some in the future, that's possible, but even without the bonds being outstanding, PICA's role is really to monitor the city's finances, make sure that things stay on track, and then each year our board, based on a recommendation and a staff report from PICA staff, will decide, is the city's 5-year plan approved? And there are a bunch of criteria about that of what the city has to do in order to get that thumbs up. And that thumbs up is incredibly important because if the board says, nope, your plan is not good, it is not fiscally sound, the city does have the opportunity to go back, try again. But if it can't get to a place where it has produced a 5-year financial plan that the PICA board thinks is in accordance with the requirements of the law, that basically cuts off virtually all state money to the city. And that is a big deal. That is $700 million in the PICA portion of the wage tax, boom. That is grant dollars for transportation, for all sorts of other things. So hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So that would immediately create a fiscal crisis if the city doesn't continue to produce balanced 5-year plans.
So what constitutes a structurally sound budget? How do we get there?
So the PICA Act is pretty clear, and there's some very just sort of formulaic requirements. It's got to have a table that tells you how much money we owe in debt. It's got to have a table that's that. But what it boils down to is, does the city have a positive fund balance in all 5 years of the plan? 1, you have to plan for 5 years. It's increasingly common, but lots of cities, still only do 1-year budgets, and you can hide a lot with gimmicks and kicking the can in a 1-year budget. But having to think over that longer time horizon forces a city not to get cute. And then having that positive fund balance, which means that at the end of the year, there's something left in the bank account. And that amount, per the PICA law, just has to be positive. There is no, in the PICA law, a limit saying it's got to be this many $1 million or this % of the city's spending or revenues. But it does need to be built on reasonable assumptions. And what I mean by that are the assumptions about how much money is going to be coming in. Are those reasonable? If you look at what the economy's doing, you look at what the tax rates are, does it all make sense that you're going to wind up with $6 billion coming in the door? And then on the spending side, are those estimates reasonable? If you know how much folks need to get paid per our union contract, if you know how many employees you have and what services you said you're going to deliver, does the math add up there? Is it based on reasonable assumptions, real past historical precedent or methodologies that are sound? And so basically, as long as the board feels that all the assumptions are reasonable and it all pencils out to a positive fund balance at the end of the day, then the PICA board will approve the plan. And that's a little different than I know we've talked in the past about fund balance and how much the city should set aside. And because, even with really reasonable assumptions, with, thinking you really got a good handle on what's going to happen in the coming 12 months, things can go sideways. And so folks like the Government Finance Officers Association, they recommend that cities have about 2 months worth of spending or revenues set aside. Philadelphia itself got really close to that this past year for the first time. That's really a tremendous accomplishment. But typically, the city's goal has been to be between 6 and 8% of revenue, so a bit lower than that guideline, but really recognizing that Philadelphia is still struggling. That it's not like we're delivering every service, what people want at the quality they want it. So balancing all the needs of Philadelphians with still setting some money aside in case is a bit of a tricky balancing act. And that's why the city aims typically for between 6 to 8%. But the PICA Act just says it has to be positive. So could be $1. But if there's $1 left over and there's any risk or concern in the assumptions about how much money is coming in or how much is going to get spent, it's really hard to say that you can be real confident with $1, which is why PICA is often looking at a somewhat more robust without putting a particular dollar amount on it, just to deal with bits of uncertainty.
And, in this 5-year plan, we're going from, maybe last year, the year before, probably the largest fund balance we've seen maybe ever, to a very small fund balance at the end of this plan, $14 million. Does that give you cause for concern? And is that something the PICA board might say, that $14 million, we're not so sure about that. We need to have another look at this.
Yeah, so the one thing I'll start by saying is that PICA's work doesn't start until after council adopts its budget, and then there's usually a revision. So I will say that we're not jumping to judge the initial proposal. We will wait to evaluate the final version that is formally submitted to PICA, because a lot can change over the course of the spring. There may be underspends in the current year budget that help push up that fund balance. There may be more revenue that comes in. There also could be things that take it the other way, that if more spending is added, but nothing good has happened, it could be worse than 14 million. And so whatever number it is when we get to that end point is when we'll be looking at it to say, okay, is this reasonable? Is this not? But yeah, obviously 14 million as an ending fund balance is really challenging. But you also then have to look at, okay, is that the only resource the city has in case of emergency? And luckily, over the past couple of years, Philadelphia has begun to make deposits into its rainy day fund and has planned deposits some of the years of the proposed 5-year plan. So there's also that context, because we're looking at, is it reasonable? So a smaller, a more petite fund balance might be acceptable if you've got cushions in other places. A large fund balance might be, still not great if there's a lot of risky assumptions. If somehow, they're like, oh, everybody's going to be fine with reduced salaries, and, the price of gas is going to drop to 25 cents a gallon, and we won't have to pay for our, gas in our fleet anymore. So you got to be thinking about what are the assumptions and how does that interplay with how much fund balance as well as other reserves that the city has.
All right, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Home Monitor.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to see you. How are you doing?
Good. I'll be okay. It's been a long day of council hearings. I guess my first question for you is, does PICA have any input in the budget prior to its being introduced, or do you all just weigh in afterward?
So part of the PICA Act and the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement between the city and PICA actually does say that PICA does have input and has ongoing communications. And functionally how that works is, we meet with the financial leadership of the city every other week. And we are constantly talking about, what risks we might see, what things would be beneficial for the city to do. So there's lots of ongoing conversations. So it's not usually a surprise to the city what PICA eventually cares about.
Now, to approve a budget, is there like a level of, there's no way we can sign on to this fiscally and be responsible, that that folks have to build into for PICA to say, no, we can't do this?
So I think that each year is a different evaluation of the context and, what's going on, some of the external factors as well, what's going on in the economy. And so it isn't necessarily, a particular number or a particular one decision that a city needs to make. One of the reasons I think that PICA was continued and folks thought it was still a good idea is that it's not very prescriptive. We still believe in the democratically elected leaders of the city to make the policy choices that need to be made. And we know that there's a lot of different ways to deliver services or collect revenue or even to be fiscally stable. So it's less about having a very specific, you must do this, you can't do this, but evaluating sort of the sum total of the policy choices that elected leaders make and making sure that they still leave the city in a sound fiscal condition.
Okay, now, you've been on both sides of this process. On the one hand, you've been on the elected official side, and now you're on the PICA side. Was there a learning curve that you had to go through, because you've done this in another position? And what was that like?
So I think I'm incredibly grateful for all the experiences that I've had within city government, in administration, under multiple mayors, understanding, where the money comes from, tax policy and administration, and as budget director, figuring out where it goes. I think that is going to serve me incredibly well at PICA. But it definitely is a bit of a mindset change. One, to be thinking primarily about the longer term. When you're in city government and you're in these positions, there are, things on fire every day, many, many, many decisions that need to be made. It's a really interesting opportunity to get to step back and think about some of the big picture questions and the longer timeframes. So that's been a bit of an adjustment. And also, sort of stepping back from being so engaged in the policy choices. And realizing that, there's a lot of different ways for a city to advance its fiscal condition, and being open to understanding different choices that elected officials and their administrations make.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. And hopefully you'll let us, reach out to you, a little bit more as the budget process continues.
All right. Well, I am always happy to do so. I love nothing more than talking about the budget, and I thank both of you for always being so enthusiastic about it.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
Thank you, Denise. And Marissa, before we let you go, I just have one last question for you. Budget will get passed probably in June. It has a hard deadline of July, well, the last day of June, basically, so it can take an effect. And then that's when your work begins, right? In July?
Yeah.
So what is that time frame for you like?
So from the point where the city delivers its 5-year plan, PICA board has 30 days. And part of the reason we're paying attention right now to council hearings, to all the materials coming out, even though those can change, 30 days is not very long to assess the city's financial condition and projections for the future. So that 30 days, though, we work with an outside, actually it's a professor, an economics professor from Temple, who provides guidance and analysis to us on the revenue side. We're looking through, we're meeting with city departments, we're talking to city leadership to understand what's behind the numbers. What assumptions did they make? What was the methodology when they projected this was going to cost this much and that was going to cost that much? And that's really, as we're stepping through every number in the budget, trying to understand, well, why is it that number? And is that reasonable? And so by the end of that 30-day period, PICA staff will deliver a report to our board, which is always public. You can go back and check out on our website the staff reports of past years. And basically what it'll step through is, looking at the revenues, looking at the spending. How, are the numbers presented reasonable? Is the plan balanced? Based on that analysis, does the staff recommend that the board approve the plan? And luckily that's generally been the case. And so we are hopeful that the version of the budget and 5-year plan we get, in the late spring is, one that hopefully is setting Philadelphia up for a really sturdy, predictable fiscal future going forward.
All right. Well, we are so glad that you're back to talk budget with us. We really appreciate it. And then we'll talk again later in the year after this process is finished, and we can talk more about that. But thank you so much for joining us.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right. We'd like to thank Marissa Waxman for joining us on the program. It's always good to see Marissa. She does such a good job walking through the budget, and we're excited we'll be able to talk to her a little later in the process as well.
Yeah, and it's good to know that we have this resource from the PICA side, because while PICA looms large and they are pretty much the last word on our budget, a lot of people don't talk about that importance a whole lot. In fact, I put something out on our new social media platforms. We are all Hall Monitor, as you can see by the crawl, is now also on Instagram and Threads in addition to Twitter. And I put something out there, advertising the show that Marissa was coming on and that she was going to, she was now the executive director of the PICA board. And someone sent me a text, said, PICA is a good thing. And I'm like, PICA may not be a good PICA, whether or not PICA is a good thing or a bad thing is irrelevant to the process. What's relevant to the process is PICA is the last word in terms of the budget. And whether you like them or not, it's a good idea to hear from them and hear what they think.
Well, and there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, PICA is the reason we have that 5-year plan. And just so people know, we're going to dive deep into the 5-year plan next week on the show. I'm still working through that. I have a couple of things I really want to talk about with the 5-year plan. But that's the first reason. And as Marissa said, that 5-year plan is really important, because if we just had 1-year budgets, she's right that there are ways to hide things and make it, if you have to do the 5-year plan, it's harder to manipulate the process, right? But the other thing is PICA does a lot of good work. They put out a lot of good reports, a lot of good information that people like us are really interested in. Then we can share it with our audience. PICA is saying this is a really good point. This is something we need to keep an eye on. That's why I really like PICA. And I liked it when Harvey Rice was in charge. Harvey was very good to us. He would explain things for us, when we were unsure about something. And having Marissa there is a good thing too.
And it also makes it so the people who put budgets together have to think long and hard about what their main priorities are. You're not going to be able to just throw everything in the pot and hope it works out. You've got to be organized. You've got to think about what is the most important thing that has to be on this year's budget, because we can't just throw it all in one thing, because we have to do 5 years out. Yeah.
All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We want to thank Lisa Haver for being on the program and Marissa Waxman. Next week, 5-year budget, 5-year budget plan we're going to talk about. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.